As a quick disclaimer, this is my first video, so expect it to suck. Okay. I think I've waited basically long enough to make this video that all the hype for the Backrooms movie is gone. And I've been waiting for the Backrooms movie since I heard of its development all the way back in 2023 when I was and still am a part of the liminal space and dreamcore subsection of the internet. After a year or two, the thought of it basically left my mind up until I saw the first trailer for it this year. I didn't have that high hopes for it, and I'll get into why a bit later. Then the next trailer came out, and my hopes were mildly reignited. So I watched the movie a day before release because my theater does Thursday previews, and the film came out on Friday for me. I watched it by myself, and the next day I watched it again with all my friends. And I was really surprised to hear that their consensus of the movie was that it was actually a solid 8 out of 10, and that they thoroughly enjoyed it. I watched it twice in 2 days, and I was completely confident, in my opinion, that the movie might have been, in my opinion, the worst of 2026. Or at least it was one of the worst movies I've personally watched so far. I would go as far as to give it a 2 out of 10. And on the second watch, I was fully confident in my rating. And then I went online to see the same reaction that my friends had. Basically, everyone was saying, this is the best movie I've ever watched. The Kane Parsons can have my kids. And I just don't agree. I just really don't think it's that good. And the people that do agree with me are more or less idiots. I see the TikToks of people saying oh, it wasn't like the Backrooms, the Roblox game.
It was horrible. There was zero execution, zero plot. Don't even know what just went on. So I played the game. I played the game on Roblox, on Steam. I got the plot and stuff, and it just was not there. Genuinely such a horrible movie.
That's not the point I'm trying to make here. Another point people try to make is that it didn't make sense. It did make sense from a story perspective, but it has a lot of plot holes, in my opinion, that I haven't seen really explained that much by people. So it just ends up being distracting from the actual movie itself. So sit back, relax, and if you really hate me or my opinion, do not hesitate to leave a hate comment. But if you find anything I say agreeable or even slightly persuading, please consider liking and subscribing, as this is my first ever video. First thing that I want to start with is the first thing that I can and should start with, which is, the trailers. I think all of you by now should have seen the trailers for this movie if you have watched the movie. The most popular trailer, I think has 40 million views or something like that, is the first official trailer where, they actually talk about the movie. But I want to start with the teaser, the one where the camera keeps going under the floor or whatever, and it changes into the Backrooms. The concept of that happening is cool on paper, but if you think about it for 10 minutes, you'll realize it creates a lot of problems for the Backrooms itself. And I'm not saying it has to make sense, but I am saying that basically it should make sense, and it doesn't, and I'll explain why later in the plot hole section. This video is going to be split up into a couple of sections, so I'll leave timestamps in the description if you want to just skip all of my brilliant dialogue. I remember how hyped everyone was for it when we first saw it. I remember I went back to school, everybody was talking about it. My friends were talking about it, I was talking about it. I sent the video to the group chat because I was in school when it dropped, and all my friends were wow, this is awesome. And I remember seeing all the Reddit posts, all the news and the leaks. I remember seeing the leaks of the behind the scenes where you could see the 80s, I don't know if it was 80s or 90s cars in the parking lot, and you could see the floating lights above that one neighborhood scene. I remember looking at everything. I was watching videos about it. I was seeing theories oh, this is what's going to happen in the Backrooms because we can analyze the trailer. And I thought, wow, this is actually pretty interesting. The only thing that didn't get me excited, however, was seeing that Kane Parsons was the director, because I recognized him as the guy that made the original Backrooms series. Fair warning, I'm the guy that says oh, there should have been no monsters in the Backrooms. But when I did actually watch the movie, I went in with an open mind and thought okay, it's not my iteration of it, it's not the original 4chan post iteration of it, it is Kane Parsons' iteration of the Backrooms. I should go in with an open mind, and even if there are monsters, which there will be, who cares, right? At the end of the day, it's a movie. If it's good, it's good. If it's bad, it's bad. So that was my reaction to the first trailer. I remember telling my friends about this, and oh, dude, you're being so negative. Oh, who cares if there's entities? How are they going to have a movie? And then I remember seeing, the barrage of comments online constantly, like on TikTok and YouTube, saying like, dude, why are people saying that the Backrooms movie shouldn't have any entities? Like, do they want 3 hours of walking? I mean, kinda. Like, the movie could have been really good, and it would have been a challenge for the director to write a movie where there are no monsters. Yeah, you'd have a psychological movie that would be really interesting, but instead we got this. So I'm trailing off, but that was my reaction to the first trailer, which doesn't feel like that long ago, but it was already 4 months ago, which is kind of crazy. The second trailer kind of it restored my hope a little, but also didn't, because one good thing about it was it actually established a story, and that story made sense. That story sounded good. Like, okay, there's this dude, he finds the back rooms, he talks to his therapist, and he goes in there to find proof. Seems like a great plot. I want to see this. I didn't see any entities in the trailer, but, you know, I'm being hopeful. There's gonna be entities. It's pretty much confirmed. I saw the casting for it. They got that like super tall guy or whatever who plays monsters. I was still thinking about who he was gonna play in the movie, because of all the entities that Kane Parsons has shown, I don't remember any tall ones other than, what was it, like the bacteria or something. But those, I don't know how you can make a costume for those. So my hope for there being no monsters was essentially gone. You know, it was an unrealistic expectation. So there was no reason for me to even think that there would have been no monsters. But I digress. The one thing I didn't like about the trailer is the music that it used. In the intro of the trailer, if you watched it, it used a track called 647 by a guy named Instupendia. I forgot how to say his name, but I've had that song on my playlist for like years, and it made me think that Kane was, like jingling keys in front of a baby, if that makes sense. Like, oh, look at this. I'm using this song that's been heavily associated with the Backrooms. Ooh, look at me. I know what you want. Oh, see, jingle, jingle. I told my friends that, and they also said I was being negative. Okay, so maybe I am. Maybe I'm just really negative about this movie. So with that said, that was all of my basic thoughts going into the movie before I watched it. I wanted to go in with an open mind, but seeing everything going behind it, I knew that a part of me would not enjoy this movie. And so with that said, I think it's time to actually do an actual summary / review of the movie, which you can skip if you want, but it's like the majority of the video, and I give some good opinions during it. So if you want, you can keep watching. If you're playing this like in the background, keep playing it, I guess. One thing that I will compliment is the first half of the movie. I really liked it. It had a really incredibly immersive quality. I genuinely wanted to see where Clark's story would go. I didn't care so much about the therapist. I don't even remember her name, actually. Okay, I just looked it up. It was Dr. Mary Klein. I kept confusing her with Rose from Smile, which you haven't seen already. Is a much better film, along with the sequel. But I digress. In terms of characters, Clark at the start is a simple character, which means I can't fully compliment him on writing, as he really only has a few traits to him, but the movie makes it work. Clark is a guy who wanted to go into architecture, but because of what we can only assume is financial struggle, he has to work at a furniture store while his wife at the time, I think, or girlfriend or something like that, studied for herself, which he paid for. He blames his problems on other people. That's his problem, but in his opinion, that's just the way his brain is wired. He can't help but blame others to avoid responsibility for his actions. His therapist is trying to work him through these emotions that eventually led to his wife leaving him after a heated argument by reenacting said argument. I honestly think this is a really creative way to explain his character early on, rather than through corny flashbacks or cliche mid-movie memory moments. It's a mouthful, but you know what I mean. When a character's like wandering around or something, and then like they start reminiscing, so that you feel bad for them like halfway through the movie. It shows his past in a realistic way that doesn't take you out of it. The movie really does make an attempt to make you care about the therapist, but it ends up feeling very rushed and unimportant. The only thing that her past adds to the movie is a Chekhov's gun in the form of a cement mold of her hand. I'm not kidding. They spent like half of the movie building up her past just to justify the fact that she has a piece of cement in her pocket. Sure. But the backstory is that Klein's mother was a mentally challenged, paranoid woman who thought that there were entities or monsters or something floating around outside, and she forbade Mary from going outside. She was then put in a care home with yet another jingling keys moment in the care home. Kane chooses to use a song from The Caretaker. You get it? Caretaker in a care home. He uses the music from his first entry in the album, Everywhere at the End of Time. I'm too lazy to look up which one, but I know it's from that one. I showed my friends after the movie ended. I was like, this is what he used in that one scene. They're like, oh, yeah, I knew it sounded familiar. If you don't know what Everywhere at the End of Time is, how? It was pretty famous. It's about dementia. Obviously, it kind of connects, but the first song first track, because there's no lyrics in that album, was Just a Burning Memory, which was super famous and became super well associated with the Backrooms like a few years ago. But this is not the song used in the scene itself, which I think is good. I think it would have been, even more of an attention grabbing moment if it was. I feel like it would have been distracting from the movie. Too many people would have realized, watching the movie, if you don't know what Everywhere at the End of Time is, or if you just know the first song and expect that to be in the movie, then you'll think, oh, well, he just used old music. That doesn't make any sense. But I'm glad that he didn't use the first track. That's something I can compliment him on. So now that we have the characters and their backstories out of the way, the story itself starts with Mary. That was horrible voice crack. Wow. Mary looking at her traumatic childhood home being demolished. And this part introduces the cement molded handprint, which she keeps as a memory. I don't know why she does this. I don't know why you'd want to remember your paranoid schizophrenic mother, but maybe they made the handprint before she went insane because they were outside. That's the only thing I can justify with this. So as I mentioned, it starts off with her and Clark, her patient and the main character of the first half. They go through this messy argument, and we get Clark's backstory. I feel for Clark in the sense that I want to see his story play out. I don't feel much for the therapist, and maybe that was intentional, as in the first half she is a side character and does become fully important in the second act. Also, quick note, if I get some details mixed up or left out, it's because I'm reciting the movie entirely by memory, because I watched it twice like a few months ago, and I've seen the same 5 clips over and over again on TikTok and everything. I also haven't watched any theory videos or explanations because I feel like all of them are just trying to defend the movie. And I think if your movie needs people defending it, then it might just not be that good of a movie. And I hate hearing people say, oh, well, you just don't get it because it's intentionally confusing. That's a dumb argument, okay? Inception was a confusing movie on the first watch, but if you think about it, the pieces begin connecting just by rewatching the movie. Again, you don't have to look online and think, oh, man, I really wonder what happened. Maybe this guy will tell me, and the guy tells you. You're like, wow, that makes sense. A good movie should be able to make you understand just by looking at the movie itself. That's the point I'm trying to get across. Okay. There is an exception, which is Tenet. I'm pretty sure it's the same director as Inception, but that movie was literally meant to be intentionally confusing. There's a line that says don't try to understand it or something. I watched 50 videos after watching that. I completely disobeyed and tried to understand it as much as possible. It's a really good movie, much better than this one. I also recommend it. Okay, so that gives you 4 movies to watch. You can watch Smile 1, Smile 2, Inception, and Tenet. Those are all better movies. I'm getting way off topic. Okay, so the story continues. Clark is now seen filming an ad in a pirate costume for his furniture store, along with his fashion inept cameraman and his girlfriend, roommate, I don't know, both of which are employees working for him. Clark's ad is messed up when he sits in a chair and it breaks on camera, prompting his crash out. There's 4 good jokes in this movie that I find funny, one of which being this one. It reminds me of early SpongeBob humor, a show which I am a huge fan of. The first instance of no clipping is the next scene, I think, of Clark and an electrician talking about how the lighting is bad, and then they find some fuses or something. I'm not an electrician, I don't know, but a switch that's halfway through the wall and it doesn't make any sense. I think this scene does a really good job of establishing the plot point that the lights don't work. I think the entire first half of this movie was essentially perfectly executed. If the movie second half was as good as its first half, I would have given this movie at least a 7, okay? Because it was actually really good in the beginning. I remember watching it, I was thinking, wow, this isn't bad. I was expecting worse, So there's another pretty good joke here. Later, Clark is seen watching TV, and there's a somewhat humorous joke of him seeing someone on TV also advertising their brand using a mascot costume, and he gets mad about it, which is funny because he was just doing the same thing. I'm explaining the joke, but Clark goes down to investigate the lighting himself after it starts spazzing out again. I don't know if that's the right word, glitching. Nah. But yeah, it starts flickering, so he goes down to figure it out himself. He then finally discovers the doorway between his store and the back rooms. So he goes through to find a pile of furniture with some of them being twisted and modified in weird ways. I do have to admit, this entire segment of the movie had me fully immersed, which is a compliment I can't give to every movie. Some games, books, movies have the ability to transport me into them. So I forget I'm even watching a movie, and I see myself, or I feel myself that I'm there with the main characters. That's how I feel with this part of the movie. This part of the movie was incredible. It's like the sound design, hearing the voices of the caveman cutout speaking in different languages. It just felt disorienting, and it felt incredible. I really loved that part. If the movie stopped after the first hour, I maybe would have walked out thinking it was incredible, because it truly was in the first half, which is why I feel really sad to say that I hated it, because the second half completely goes back and ruins it, So Clark walks around. I can hear various audio recordings coming from a cardboard cutout. I still don't understand the thing with the cardboard cutouts. I'm not into the Kane Parsons lore. I've never watched any of his other videos except the first one, and that was only to hate watch because I hate entities in the back rooms. But I could excuse it because it's his iteration. I don't really care that much. It didn't contribute all that much to the scene other than adding, the necessary atmosphere to really carry this scene into greatness, essentially, immersion. I felt like that one clip of SpongeBob where he's in the movie theater, and he's almost standing out of his seat because he's so interested. That was literally me. I forgot I was watching a movie in the theater, If the movie, no, it could have kept everything that it had in the second half, but as long as it kept this atmosphere, this feeling that it gave you while you watched it, I probably would have given it a 9, honestly. But if that were the case, this review wouldn't exist, The movie continues with him bringing his 2 employees back, and because he wants to find proof of the back rooms, There's this little problem with the scene I'll talk about later. They go back to the store with his employee's camera and his girlfriend or roommate or whatever she is, He tries talking them into going through. Obviously, they think he's crazy, but they eventually do go in themselves. There's this one joke in this scene that actually made my whole theater laugh, or chuckle at least. It's this clip right here. Eventually, things go wrong, and a mysterious force, takes the life of the fashion inept cameraman. And the girl and Clark are separated. I don't remember her name. I'm sorry. There's a scene of Clark entering a Christmas-themed area, and I think they're called still lifes. It chases after him. I have a problem with the scene. I promise I'll get into these later. I keep saying that, but once I saw this scene, I kind of lost hope for the rest of the movie. I realized this movie isn't for me. This movie isn't just for me. This movie is also bad. Okay, but when I saw that scene, at that point I wasn't thinking this movie is bad. I'm thinking, this movie just isn't for me. These people here, I look around, I see them enjoying it. I don't know how they knew that there were Thursday previews. Maybe they really wanted to watch this movie just like me, okay? But Clark runs away eventually, and we get an actually good scene of him in this weird room, and his employee is talking to him on the other side, and on her side, she says that she sees glass and she can see him. But on his side, all we see is wall. So it really makes your brain fill in the details of what she's seeing versus what he's seeing. But then Kane decides to ruin it entirely by having what I assume is the entity pick up the camera from behind Clark and start filming him. Why does it do this? I guess we'll never know. It makes no sense. Why is the entity picking up a camera? Why is it filming him? Why doesn't it kill him like it killed the other guy? Why did it kill the other guy? What did the other guy do? I feel like it would have made a lot more sense if the entity was walking over. He turns around, he sees it, starts walking closer to him, and then it knocks over the table, the camera's on, and the camera falls over, and that's how the scene ends, okay? They should have just let me write this movie at this point, But they didn't. So that could have ended the scene a lot better. It would have it would have ended the tension in a way that makes sense, and then it would have perfectly transitioned into the second half of the movie. And by doing this, it really just pulls me out and makes me ask a lot of questions that I shouldn't be asking in this scene. The only two questions on my mind should be, is she... Sorry. Wow. I haven't had water in like an hour. The only two questions on my mind should be, is she okay, and what's chasing him? Not, why is a monster choosing to pick up a camera and not just attack him? If I remember correctly, this is actually the end of half one. And that's about where the good parts of this movie, for me at least, end. Now we go into the perspective of Mary, the therapist that has barely any reason to at all care for her. You know, she realizes that he hasn't been going to any sessions for weeks or months or however long it's been. So I don't know why she didn't check his house or ask the police. Instead, she decides to go to the store herself. And the explanation for, I guess, why she did this, I failed to mention this because it wasn't important until now, but the reason that Clark needed proof is because he went to Mary with a map of the Backrooms, told her about it, realized how insane he sounded, and said he needed proof. So the only thing she's working on right now is the fact that her patient told her that he found something.
I found something.
I know you're going to complain that I didn't mention this sooner, as it's literally the scene with the monologue we see in the trailers, but honestly, I could care less, and you probably forgot about it too. Mary goes over to see a bunch of letters under the door, so that if you couldn't tell, it's been quite a while. You know, the store's been shut down for a while. All three of them have gone missing. It's been a while, you know. So she goes downstairs and finds the doorway, and she doesn't want to go through, but of course, for the sake of plot convenience, there is a fly who flies through the wall for some reason. Usually, I don't know, anytime I see a fly, it's never on the wall. Actually, I always see them floating in the middle of my room, being annoying. Or landing on my food when I'm eating it, if I'm outside. But it goes through the wall for whatever reason, and it convinces her to go through and see for herself. So she goes through and finds, first of all, one thing is that the pile of furniture from the beginning is gone, which I kind of forgot about that detail until I rewatched some of the clips of it. So she goes through and she eventually finds paintings made by, I think, Clark, because that's the only person the painting's could have been made by, or the female employee, but that wouldn't make too much sense because she's like right by the exit, so she would have figured it out and left, but she didn't. One thing about this scene is that the painting on the wall says that the floor plans keep changing, if I remember correctly, which from what I can tell is a lie. The Backrooms layout was the exact same as it was months ago when Clark first came through. I don't care if it's for, you know, reusing the same set piece, you know, if for cost. You could have just edited it in CGI, you know. It wouldn't be too much to change like one wall in the background to make you say, oh, I guess the floor plan really did change, you know. Instead, it's the same thing, you know. So it kind of takes it away for me to see the exact same layout. We even see like the same stop sign, the same hallway, the same everything essentially that Clark saw months ago. Now Mary is seeing it for herself, which should not be the case if the Backrooms really do function the way that they say they do, right? Like, I even looked this up on Reddit, and people were trying to explain this, and every explanation just sounded like pure cope. Like, they were saying like, oh, well, the entrance is an anchor point, so anything by the anchor point doesn't change. Says who? Who said this? Your anchor point? Doorway? The only thing I understand is the doorway. Why would nothing change near the doorway? Wouldn't it be more tense if the exit suddenly disappeared? Like, that would have been a cool plot point. Imagine she's stuck there. She can't go back. But no, they didn't think about that. So we see Clark, and he tells her, and he comes over, and then something comes stomping over, like from a little bit far away, and before Mary can react, Clark chokes her out for whatever reason. And the way it happens on screen was unique, to say the least, right? It kind of took me out of it a little. It was a little distracting, but Mary wakes up tied up in a kitchen-like room with Clark and 3 still lifes. There's a disfigured man in a wheelchair with a lamp attached to him, and a woman with red hair, who I'm pretty sure both of these people are the ones that we saw in the Christmas room scene. I know for a fact we saw the guy in the wheelchair with the lamp, but I'm assuming they're implying that the woman was the same one that was chasing him. It was like a still life of a woman chasing him. That's when I realized this movie wasn't for me. Like, I saw that. It looked goofy. It looked stupid, honestly. It didn't look that horrifying or scary. It didn't scare me at all, actually. It made me... I was trying not to laugh, okay? That's the point I'm trying to get across. It wasn't scary. And there's an old white guy. So In case you weren't scared before, you should be scared now. There's an old white guy in the room, okay? Clark quotes Mary's own opening monologue back to her, which in the beginning of the movie she was talking about like doorways and stuff. It truly means nothing in this scene, okay? The only reason that he says it is just to be a callback to the beginning of the movie. Like, it doesn't recontextualize it at all. It doesn't make it more interesting. The only way it makes sense is if you draw like the most obvious connections to the movie itself. And other than that, it truly does mean nothing. Clark is stuck in his cycles of blaming other people, but that doesn't really have much to do with the back rooms. It's literally what a therapist told him. The only equivalent I can think of this is someone saying something like, dude, the prescription medication at the start of the movie perfectly connects to the problems the character faces in the future of the movie. Like, yeah? It was given to him by his doctor to help with his issues. I would hope it would. Maybe that's a bad example, but you get my point. It doesn't serve the plot in any other way other than adding false depth to this otherwise bland movie. And yes, I said bland. Literally almost nothing interesting happens, or nothing unique, at least. A character discovers a new location. We get a generic scary chase from something we can't see yet trope. Then we get a monster is behind the character, but we can only see the reaction trope. We have someone go look for them. Then there's a chase. Then the movie ends. And then the credits roll, and you realize you haven't been watching the Backrooms. You've actually been watching Wreck-It Ralph 2, because they both share the same plot. Two people go through, and one person gets corrupted by this strange new world. And then the girl has to save him before he turns into a monster. Or actually, he does turn into a monster. In both movies, technically. Nothing about this movie is anything other than generic. If you take away the backroom setting and put this story in a forest or something, and it immediately becomes another generic horror movie. If this movie didn't have the already established backrooms to back it up, nobody would want to see it, and it would be forgotten. I know you can say that's a shallow criticism. You can say that about like any, what's it called? Whatever. You can say that about anything that's been put onto screen from something that already exists. And while yes, that's true, I do feel like with some movies it can truly be interesting. Like, how many movies have you watched that are based on a book and you never knew about the book, but the movie was super interesting? That's the point I'm trying to get across. The Backrooms in itself is a good concept. It is a good psychological horror concept, which is why a director would want to tackle it. It seems like a challenge. It's something interesting. It's something that connects with us on a personal, deep level. And the way that you make it connect to an audience is not by having these generic horror tropes that ruin the movie and add more plot holes than they should. I truly do think that given a different director, a different script, maybe the same set, this movie could have been better, okay? If they truly spent all their time trying to fully lean into the psychological aspect of it rather than the entity aspect of it, this movie truly could have been great. That is assuming that they keep the atmosphere and the sound design of the first half. I actually did not care that there were entities in the first half, because in the first half they were fully off screen. Like, you only saw them when that woman started like chasing after him in the Christmas tree room, which is why I hated that scene, is because it kind of ruined the first half for me as well, you know? So Mary listens to her own speech, probably realizing how annoying she sounds, before having to listen to another one now from Clark. We are meant to believe that Clark has gone insane from his time in the Backrooms. I mean, even if you do assume that the Backrooms has time dilation, he spent years in here, I really don't think he would have gone insane. And the way they portray his insanity is just unrealistic and stupid, you know? So Clark opens up a fridge door and we can see the severed head of his female employee. Why? Why did he kill her? His answer to that question is that she didn't understand or something like that. I don't remember. But it's stupid. It really is. Okay, Clark was only in there for maybe a few months at most. And like I said, if you don't believe that the Backrooms has time dilation, it really only was a few months. So we're supposed to believe that over a few weeks or a few months, he became insane enough to behead somebody. Why? Why didn't he then kill Mary? She, of all people, he went back to get proof for her. This whole movie essentially happened because she didn't believe him. She should be the top priority. Instead, Clark ties her up and explains to her how the Backrooms work, and even shows that you can eat the still lifes, because the movie, remember, it has to have at least some creepy aspects to be considered a horror movie, and it can't just be walking. I mean, it could have been walking, actually. But, then it wouldn't be interesting because we have a director. No, I'm not going to finish my sentence, okay? We have a director, okay? Instead, he ties her up and explains to her how the backrooms work. What was his plan after this? This scene falls flat immediately once you ask that question. Did he want her to stay with him forever? Would he have let her go after? Why should I care? I barely know her as a character anyway. Why did you make the side character the main character this late in the movie? I feel nothing for her. They redo the reenactment from the beginning to satisfy Clark's ego, and to make the scene scarier, Clark scalps the head of what we can assume is his ex's still life, which is the same woman because she has red hair or whatever, and he puts it on her head, much to her dismay, which isn't even that creepy when you consider that the still lifes, I assume, can't feel pain because they don't move when you cut into them. So this is honestly just dumb. It's a dumb, pointless segment that was really only put in here because they realized that the scene wasn't already tense enough. Okay, it's like a gross out. It's a cheap attempt at making you, at least if not scared, then disgusted, right? Mary then crashes out and says that it's his fault for not wanting to change, and she doesn't know how to help him. What do you mean? It's your job. You deal with this all the time. You really just can't play along? De-escalate? This scene made me completely forget that she had ever been a therapist or a psychologist or whatever she clearly wasn't at this moment. She tells Clark that if he wants to continue being a pathetic man baby, he should just stay here forever and let her go. I agree. That was originally what he wanted to do. Why did he kidnap her? Why did he not either let her get eaten by whatever was chasing after them when he choked her out? Or if not that, why didn't he just let... It makes no sense, okay? There's truly no point to this. But he apparently lets her go. But right as he does...
I'm sorry.
What?
When Pirate Clark runs in, or stumbles in, or whatever he does, the still lifes, specifically the women, start running away. Really don't know why, because I'll explain in a tiny bit why I think that's weird. Actually, not in a tiny bit. I'll explain in the plot hole section, all right? So Clark is afraid of Pirate Clark, which is, if you couldn't tell by now, it's his own still life, right? But for some reason, this one's super active. This one runs around. This one is super disfigured, and it's kind of weird. I don't know why, because if the other still lifes look like people that are their original selves, why does this one not follow that same formula? So Clark tries telling Pirate Clark that, oh, we don't have to change. She told us we don't have to change. And then I'll explain what's wrong with this scene in the plot holes, okay? But for now, all you need to know is that Pirate Clark goes crazy, bites into Clark, kills him, brutally, might I add, and then Mary runs away, okay? Then we get a boring, generic chase sequence where basically nothing interesting happens. We have Mary running away, we have Pirate Clark chasing her, and that's it. That's the only thing that happens in the scene. There's no atmosphere, there's no ambience, there's really nothing. The movie decides that all we need to see right now is Mary getting chased, because obviously the Backrooms is not an important psychological concept at all, and you can completely justify having this in your movie, because why not, right? Who cares? It's only the Backrooms. So there's what's essentially a boss battle. Mary is like running around as she re-enters like the Backrooms version of the store, and she has to like fight off against Pirate Clark, and she like breaks his leg and he's like crawling, and then she like knocks over a caveman thing, and the caveman thing actually has like a button that controls gas canisters around the room that somehow puts Pirate Clark to sleep. It truly doesn't make that much sense, right? And then I'm kind of messing up the timeline of events in this specific moment. I'm not, like, all you need to know is that there was gas or something and there was a fight, right? So Mary and Clark, Pirate Clark, are fighting, and she pulls out, take a wild guess, okay? She pulls out a block of cement from her back pocket and slams it into Pirate Clark's face, and a grand total of nothing happens from it, okay? You wasted like a third of the movie explaining why she has a brick of cement in her pocket for nothing. There was no point to anything that happened in her story, and you can't tell me otherwise, okay? That, like, there truly nothing happened. It was a waste of my time, and the only thing I have to show for sitting through your boring backstory for a therapist character that I truly could care less about is a pile of dust and a few pieces of what used to be a handprint in cement. That's really it. Okay, if I sound mad, it's because I am. I wasted my time, and I wasted 2 tickets worth of money on this movie. And I even bought the poster. I bought the poster knowing the movie would be bad, but this movie truly did exceed my expectations in the worst possible way, okay? So there's another part that I forgot to mention, is that there are scientists actively monitoring the Backrooms from whatever foundation they come from, whatever company, who cares? I don't remember, because it truly took up like a grand total of 5 minutes in the movie, and they didn't tell us anything about them. I think the whole point was that it was supposed to be mysterious, but you can't just end a movie ambiguously like that because you want to. I know this ties into the Kane Parsons lore, but I think me and like maybe a majority of the people that watch this movie are not going to tune into anything that happens post or before this movie. Nothing in this movie makes me want to continue watching. I don't care what happens to this therapist character. I truly don't care what happens in the whatever foundation. I really don't. But in the movie, these scientists are monitoring the place, and there's one scientist who sees Clark on the cameras, and I'm really assuming that the whatever foundation is completely understaffed, because once Mary is saved by the whatever foundation, she's interviewed by the scientist, the same guy, because the reason that he's even there is because on his day off, which I don't know how he's allowed to have a day off when he's the only worker there, essentially. He was on his day off, and he saw the advertisement of Clark in his pirate costume and recognized him from the blurry camera footage. So he, I'm assuming, goes back to his job just for the sake of being at his job. And then he interviews Mary, and this one little detail breaks essentially most of the movie. During the interview, he pulls out a photo of Clark standing next to Pirate Clark. And Pirate Clark he's censored out. But this essentially ruins most of what they were setting up, okay? And I'll explain why in the plot hole section. I promise I will, okay? But the last part of the movie breaks it even more. Because as Mary is sitting there, the scientist just told her that we don't know if she's going to live or die. The camera goes underneath the floor, and we see her still life. This introduces a lot of problems, but the next few scenes introduce more problems. We then see the same locations from the movie, except now they're in the back rooms, and they're like halfway through being morphed. If you really want to hear me explain everything right now, you can just skip to the plot hole section. But I'm going to explain a few other problems first, all right? Starting with the music. This is a smaller one, but I think the music was meant to either feel liminal or scary, but it kind of doesn't. I really don't care that Kane Parsons produced it himself. It just didn't make it feel the way it could have for me. Maybe that's a personal thing. I'm not saying it was bad. Obviously, anyone that can produce music is a magician, and they have talent and whatever else. But in my opinion, I just didn't think it really fit in with the movie the way it could have and should have, Especially with a movie like this, because the Backrooms and liminal spaces in general online, the community built around these, music was a heavy influence. You have songs like I mentioned, 647, Comfort Chain. You have, what was that one song? Kids or something. That one, I forgot, okay? But there's a lot of music that is essentially tied in with this concept of liminal spaces in the Backrooms and all this stuff. And to have the music for me at least, fall flat kind of ruins it a little more, or it's a little more like a disappointment, you know. One thing that I will compliment and also will complain about is the ambience and mood. The first half of this movie, like I said, was incredible with this. The second half, however, throws all of it away. There's no point in the second half where it feels anywhere as good as it was in the first. I think the reason I feel this way is that when we witness Clark's encounter with this new location, it is strange and mysterious and new. It is truly a new location. The second time with Mary, we already know the layout. We know the danger. We even have an explanation from Clark, as well as him somehow piecing together exactly how the place functions in a matter of a day, I guess. I think a film like this needs its ambience and its mood to be perfect throughout, which is what makes the Backrooms such a hard concept to adapt. You need a talented director to make it work. Speaking of directors, I truly could not care less that Kane Parsons was 20 when he directed this. That is a fully grown adult. I'm tired of hearing this spoken of as if it's this incredible feat to do something as a grown adult because you can't drink yet. This is less of a complaint about the movie and just more of like the fan base surrounding it, but I would be a lot more impressed if he was like 12 or something, you know, but 20 is just not that crazy to me. You know, I'm 16. I feel like I could probably do the same if I really wanted to. But the thing is, I wasn't picked up by A24. And this is 100% jealousy talking, by the way. But I also do think it's annoying to see. Because everywhere I see posts like, oh, Kane Parsons is only 20 years old, but he's directing his first movie. Okay, sure. Go ahead. You're a grown adult. You're a grown man. Do what you want, you know? So, as I said before, but I want to go a little more into depth with this, or in depth with this, I mean, is the fact that there are monsters, right? As I said before, I would have wanted a movie with no monsters. However, I wouldn't mind if the monsters stayed how they were before the Christmas scene, off screen, essentially. That would have contributed greatly to the atmosphere and the tension. It fits the theme of the Backrooms, you know, an invisible threat that can kill you if you get lost or separated from the group. Imagine the amount of plot that you could juice out of this concept. Instead, we got a random woman chasing you, a random guy in a wheelchair, and a white guy, as well as a tall pirate who looks laughably idiotic, right? I don't care what you say. I don't care how much glaze there is. I don't care how many edits there are of Pirate Clark. He looks ridiculous. He looks stupid. I had to hold my laugh in the theater when he was picking up Clark because I genuinely could only imagine laughing. Like there's nothing scary about that scene. In all honesty, I truly watched that scene and all I could think is, this isn't scary. This is stupid. You know, maybe I just sound super negative. Maybe I just sound really mean or like down-spirited about this movie, but it could have been better if they picked a different design for him, because having this lumbering, tall, skinny giant that is essentially useless. He does nothing in the movie other than chase Mary in one scene, kill Clark in another scene, and then get himself captured by the whatever foundation later. That's all he does. He had on it. Other than that, he also manages to kill a random worker in the very, very beginning of the movie. I forgot to mention that part because it truly did escape my mind. I guess it's fine. You know, it's Kane Parsons' iteration. He can put as many monsters as he wants in his movie, right? One thing that I also want to mention that I feel like I haven't seen a lot of people mention is the cinematography. Specifically, a lot of the shots in this movie feel really performative, and the other half of the shots feel way too ambitious and unique that it like pulls me out of it. For example, when Mary and her mother are putting their handprints in the cement, it's a view from the cement's perspective, I guess you can say, and we see behind them a crane going overhead, and then it cuts to like the house being demolished. It's an interesting concept, but it just pulled me out of it both times I watched it. I really forgot that it happened, and it like distracted me a lot. Maybe that's what it was supposed to do. If it was, I applaud them. It really did make me distracted, but if it wasn't, then that's bad. You know, I shouldn't be distracted in the first 5 minutes of your movie, you know. There's another shot that even my friend agrees, the one that, you know, told me I was being negative about the movie. He still defends the movie as a solid 8, but we both agree that when Clark is going to enlist his employees to help him, the like the symmetrical shot of his I can't talk, okay? I think I might just end the video here. I'm kidding. The symmetrical shot of like their apartments or whatever, not apartments, like mobile homes, trailer homes, whatever they're called, right? Small homes that are close together with a bunch of picnic tables, and like the clouds that are like all super dreamcore, like liminal or whatever. It's performative, okay? I've said it before, I'll say it again. It feels like jingling keys, right? Like, and another thing, now that I'm remembering it, another scene that felt like that is when Mary is at this like party or something. This scene contributes nothing to the movie, by the way, other than having ulterior motives play in the background, which I've known that song for like a long time, but I look online, and another thing I hate about this movie is the online presence it now has. Like, I see brands putting their ads censored in the back rooms. You know, you see these like parodies of it. You see people saying, like, I saw people saying like, oh, ulterior motives, but that was actually lost media. And I'm like, yeah, well, it's not that lost. I have it on my playlist right now. I'm listening to it, you know. And you can hear it in the background playing during the party when Mary leaves. I don't know if they got the rights to it because it was like super muffled, but you can tell it was there. My friends didn't notice it. I did, okay? Another camera angle I didn't like was when like the camera, what was it called? The homeless man was like picking something up, and it was like a super like weird angle of it. I didn't like that at all. That's just a personal gripe, you know. But finally, the part you've all been waiting for, the plot holes. These are the ones that I said at the beginning pulled me out of the movie, made me honestly just feel stupid for even watching this movie, because there's quite a few of them, and I'm gonna rant here, okay? So I'm just gonna rapid fire these, right? When Clark first tells Mary about the back rooms, the first thing he says about it is that it looks like his store just continues. No, it does not. It really doesn't. Nothing about the infinite hallways or pile of furniture scream, "This is my store's basement continuing." Then he continues to say, "Imagine telling someone to draw a dog if they've never seen it. They may get some things right, but yada yada." Nobody would think of this after spending 5 minutes in the back rooms. You mean to tell me that Clark walked in, the first thing that he thought of was immediately realizing the logistics of the back rooms after seeing infinite yellow hallways? It's so stupid. And then Mary even repeats it at the end to solidify that this is the iconic quote they want you to remember. It feels so forced into the dialogue that I can only assume Kane thought of it and thought, yeah, that's the quote, and then needed to write his way around it, which he did terribly. Speaking of the back rooms and their logistics, how does it work? If it really does constantly remake reality over and over like we see in the outro, why is it not constantly changing? In fact, why is it actually not just an identical reality to ours? If the game Telephone, where you ask someone or where you give someone a phrase at the start and then they like repeat it until the phrase is completely different. It's supposed to be like super funny. Imagine if I got like 10 people to play that, but every time that they repeated my prompt, I just yelled out the prompt out loud to them. You would get the same result at the end. And that's what I'm trying to convey with the Backrooms. If the Backrooms is constantly copying our world, then it should look exactly like our world constantly. And not just that, but if it's always copying still lifes of people, why is there not the same amount of people in real life that are also still lifes? Why are they not shoulder to shoulder in the back rooms? That it just doesn't make sense, right? The movie even has the nerve to tell us that the floor plans keep changing, but they really don't. If we are to believe the teaser, a scene in the movie, and the ending where we sink into the floor and see the room change, everywhere in the back rooms should be geographically proportional to real life. This is most likely how Clark remembered where to find his ex's still life, by retracing his way to her house from his memory. Speaking of still lifes, why do they just stand around and do nothing when previously they chased Clark? If they're filled with white edible pudding-like substance, why did Pirate Clark bleed red and feel pain? Why is Pirate Clark hostile when we literally have Phil the scientist hold up a picture of Pirate Clark being docile with normal Clark? You can't say, oh, but he ate Clark because he saw Clark eat the still lifes and copied him, because that's what my friend said, because he watched a theory review. Because Clark already had prior knowledge of the still life being edible, implying that he had been eating them in front of Pirate Clark with no issue beforehand, which is why he didn't die of starvation. If Pirate Clark was docile before, why are the still lifes afraid of him, as well as Clark? Clark even says, why are you in here? Why not? He goes everywhere with you. Why did you kill your female employee and cut off her head? You couldn't just show her the exit? You would have shown Mary the exit, implying you know where it is. So why not just let her go? Were you afraid she'd tell people? I mean, I guess that's the only answer I can think of, but What at all was the purpose of beheading her and preserving her other than for shock value? What purpose does whatever company serve if they couldn't just apprehend an entity that had been known to be hostile and has been killing their agents, which we see him do in the intro? Why is Pirate Clark picking and choosing who to be violent towards? Is anything in this movie worth taking seriously at all? We even see the birds from the parking lot in the back rooms, implying that we are in the parking lot area or similar. So why does it look nothing like a parking lot? Why is the stop sign the only object there that hasn't been morphed? And why wasn't it also morphed after months or years when Mary re-enters? Why is Phil the only one to do anything around the whatever company? Why did Mary give an entire backstory to justify the fact that she has a piece of cement in her pocket? If Clark and his female employee could talk between walls in that one scene, why do we never see that happen anywhere else in the movie? So yeah, those are my thoughts. To summarize, the Backrooms movie is a bland, generic attempt to tackle a concept that should be handled with much more care than it was afforded in this movie. It was full of plot holes and nonsensities that really made it distracting to pay attention to and made it really hard to accept as okay. The only thing I can compliment is the set design and the atmosphere of the first half. Other than that, this movie will stay as a 2 out of 10 for me. Thanks for watching.